The transport ship entered the atmosphere without ceremony. No flare. No announcement. Just a long, silent descent through a sky the color of burnt metal, its hull glowing faintly from the friction as it cut downward toward the surface of Virex 9. Inside, packed between rows of armored recruits, sat a human. He did not stand out. Not at first. He wasn't the tallest in the cabin. Not even close. Most of the beings around him were built for war in ways that were obvious at a glance. Thick plating across shoulders, reinforced limbs, skin that looked like it could stop a blade without effort. They carried presence the way weapons carried weight. The human did not. He sat with his hands resting loosely on his knees, back straight but relaxed, eyes forward. No tension. No visible anticipation. No attempt to size up the others around him, which, in a room like this, was unusual. Most recruits did. A four-armed Varkon 2 seats ahead kept flexing its upper limbs, testing joint resistance. A broad-shouldered Keth soldier, near the rear, adjusted the magnetic locks on his boots for the third time in under a minute. Even the quieter species, those built more for precision than power, watched everything. Measured everything. Because they understood where they were going. The human did not seem to care. Or if he did, he hid it well. The ship shifted slightly as it broke through the lower cloud layer. The movement was subtle, but enough to make several recruits brace instinctively. A low vibration passed through the floor plating, steady and controlled. Landing approach. A thin line of light appeared along the side of the cabin as the external shutters adjusted. Through it, the surface of Virex 9 came into view. Dark. Dense. Heavy. Even from orbit, you could see it in the way the atmosphere moved. Slow, thick currents pressing down instead of flowing freely. The planet carried gravity well above standard. Not unstable. Not dangerous for infrastructure. But enough to matter. Enough to change how a body moved. Enough to break one that wasn't ready. The facility they were descending toward sat alone in that weight. A single structure of black alloy anchored into the planet's surface, like a spike driven into stone. No surrounding city. No support grid visible from above. Just the station and the endless terrain stretching outward in every direction. Training ground. Not for beginners. The ship lowered toward the landing platform, massive clamps already extending to receive it. As the hull aligned, a deep metallic impact echoed through the cabin. Controlled, deliberate, final. Docked. The restraints disengaged with a sharp click. No one spoke. They stood in sequence, row by row, the way trained recruits always did when entering a new command environment. Gear checked. Posture adjusted. Breathing controlled. The human stood with them. Same movement. Same timing. Nothing about it drew attention. Until the gravity shifted. It happened the moment the rear hatch opened. Not a violent change. Not something that knocked anyone off balance. Just a sudden, unmistakable increase in weight pressing down through the floor and into every joint. Subtle, but real. Several recruits reacted immediately. The Varkan's upper limbs tensed harder than before. The Keth soldier's boots locked into place with an audible snap. One of the smaller, long-limbed species near the front hesitated for half a second before stepping forward. Adjusting. Calculating. The human stepped down onto the platform. And kept walking. No pause. No visible correction. No shift in posture beyond what the motion itself required. If he felt the difference, it didn't show. Behind him, one of the recruits muttered something under their breath, too quiet to carry, but sharp enough in tone to suggest discomfort. The human didn't turn. Didn't react. He moved forward with the line, into the facility entrance, under the weight of a world that was already pressing harder than most would ever experience. As if it was just another floor. The entrance corridor was long, narrow, and quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. Not empty. Controlled. Every step echoed differently here, shorter, heavier, as if the floor itself resisted movement. The gravity inside the facility was already higher than the surface outside. Not by much. Just enough to make it clear. This place was calibrated. Deliberately. The recruits moved in a single line, guided by a strip of dim white light embedded along the wall. No guards. No instructions. No visible surveillance. But everyone knew they were being watched. Places like this always watched. The human walked with the others, matching their pace without trying to lead or fall behind. His breathing stayed even. His stride adjusted slightly, shorter steps, more grounded, but the change was automatic, unforced. Ahead, the corridor opened into a wide intake chamber. That was where the difference became obvious. Dozens of recruits were already there, gathered in loose formations across the floor. Different species, different builds. Some towering, some lean, some carrying natural armor or additional limbs that shifted slowly as they stood. All of them had one thing in common. They were strong. Not average recruits. Not entry-level candidates. These were individuals selected from across multiple systems, pulled into one place for a single purpose. Advanced conditioning. The kind that didn't improve you. The kind that decided if you stayed or broke. A low hum filled the chamber, machines embedded somewhere deep in the walls, cycling power through unseen systems. The air felt dense. Not thick enough to restrict breathing, but heavy enough that every inhale carried weight with it. Subtle pressure. Constant. A tall figure near the far wall rolled his shoulders once, slowly, as if testing the limits of his joints. His skin was layered and dark, overlapping plates that shifted slightly with movement. Another recruit beside him, taller still, kept adjusting the angle of her stance, spreading her weight carefully across 4 legs instead of 2. Adapting. All of them were adapting. The human stepped into the chamber and stopped near the edge of the formation. Not in front, not hiding, just there. His eyes moved once across the room, taking in the size difference, the posture, the quiet tension. Then he went still again. No reaction, no comparison. At the far end of the chamber, a raised platform overlooked the floor. It had been empty when the first recruits entered. It wasn't empty now. The shift in attention happened before anyone spoke. A subtle change, postures straightening, conversations stopping before they fully formed, eyes moving toward the same point without needing direction. Authority had arrived. The figure standing on the platform did not announce himself. He didn't need to. He was larger than most of the recruits below, his frame built wide and solid, with forearms resting loosely at his sides. His skin carried a muted, dark tone, marked with thin lines that looked less like decoration and more like history. Scars. Not fresh, not recent, but earned. His presence didn't fill the room loudly. It compressed it, like pressure building without sound. When he finally spoke, his voice was level, measured. "You are not here to learn," he said. No introduction. No rank given. Just the statement. You are here to be measured. The words settled into the room without echo. If you improve, he continued, that is a byproduct, not the goal. A pause. No one moved. The goal is to identify what you are under strain. His eyes moved across the recruits, not quickly, not slowly, just deliberately, stopping nowhere, missing nothing. When his gaze passed over the human, it didn't linger, not even for a second. It moved on the same as it had for everyone else, which, in its own way, was a decision. You will be assigned to units, he said. You will train under controlled conditions. Those conditions will change without warning. Another pause. You will not be told when. A slight shift moved through the formation. Not fear. Not yet. Awareness. The baseline gravity in this facility, he said, is set above galactic standard. No number given. No need. You will adapt. Not a suggestion. A statement of expectation. Or you'll be removed. Silence again. Then, units are displayed. A section of the wall behind the recruits lit up, rows of names appearing in clean, sharp text, each grouped under a designation. No explanation of what the designations meant. Just placement. The recruits began to move. Quickly now. Checking names. Finding positions. Small clusters forming as individuals stepped toward their assigned zones. The human approached the display without urgency. Found his name. Read it once. Then moved. His unit designation sat near the lower middle of the list. Not elite. Not weak. Unremarkable. He stepped into the marked area along with 11 others. They were not small. Every one of them carried visible strength, dense muscle, reinforced limbs, bodies built for force or endurance or both. One stood nearly a full head taller than the rest. Another had a posture so balanced it looked engineered. They glanced at each other, measured. Quietly, the human did not engage. He stood in position, waited. On the platform, the instructor's gaze shifted again, this time toward the newly formed units. There was no speech, no encouragement, just observation. And then, without warning, the floor beneath them changed. The gravity increased. Not gradually, not gently. A clean, immediate step upward. The effect was instant. Several recruits adjusted hard, knees bending deeper than intended, shoulders dropping under the added load. One of the taller ones exhaled sharply, the sound forced out as his body recalibrated to the new weight. A few recovered quickly. A few took longer. One took a half step back before catching himself. The human felt it. Of course he did. The pressure settled across his frame, heavier now, more present. His muscles engaged a fraction deeper. His stance widened by a small, almost unnoticeable margin. And then, he held. No visible strain. No reaction beyond adjustment. The instructor watched the unit, watched the shifts, the recoveries, the hesitation. His eyes passed over the human again. This time they slowed. Not long. Not enough for most to notice. But enough to register. Then he looked away. Training begins now, he said. And the real test hadn't even started yet. They were not given time to prepare. No briefing. No demonstration. Just a signal. A sharp tone echoed once through the chamber, and a section of the far wall slid open, revealing a long circular track that curved out of sight. 3 rotations, the instructor said. Full gear. That was all. The units moved immediately. No hesitation now. No uncertainty. This was familiar territory, physical assessment, endurance, output under pressure. Every recruit here had done some version of this before. They moved toward the gear racks lining the wall. The equipment was standardized, but heavy, dense material plating, weighted core packs, joint stabilizers that added resistance instead of reducing it. Built to slow you down. Built to expose weakness. The human reached the rack with his unit. He picked up the gear without inspecting it. No testing. No adjustment beyond what was necessary to secure it. Straps locked. Weight settled. Done. Around him, others took longer. One tightened his shoulder clamps twice before stepping away. Another shifted her weight side to side, testing how the added load affected her balance under the already increased gravity. Small delays. Small calculations. The human stepped onto the track. And waited. The instructor did not count them down. He simply turned and started walking. That was the signal. The first recruit broke into a run. Then another. Then all of them moved at once, falling into motion as the units surged forward onto the circular path. The track resisted them immediately. Not just from gravity. The surface itself had texture, fine, almost invisible ridges that created drag with every step. Not enough to stop movement. Enough to make it cost more. The first 100 meters spread the group out. The stronger builds pushed ahead early, long strides, powerful leg drive, using momentum to fight the resistance. Heavier species leaned into the weight, forcing their bodies forward with controlled aggression. The smaller ones adjusted differently, shorter steps, quicker cadence, trying to maintain rhythm instead of overpowering the environment. The human ran in the middle. Not leading. Not falling behind. Just steady. His stride wasn't the longest. Wasn't the fastest. But it didn't change. Not when the first incline appeared. Not when the curve tightened. Not when the gravity shifted again. Just slightly, as the track passed over a calibrated section designed to increase load, without warning. Others felt it. A large recruit near the front stumbled half a step, catching himself with a hard exhale. Another behind him lost rhythm completely for 2 strides before forcing it back. Adjustments. Corrections. Effort. The human's pace shortened by a fraction. His upper body leaned forward just enough to compensate. And then it stabilized again. No break. No visible disruption. Just continuation. By the end of the first rotation, Breathing patterns had changed across the group. What started controlled was now measured. What started measured was now strained. The air still felt heavy. The weight still pressed. And the track kept demanding more. A tall recruit ahead of the human began gripping the straps of his gear as he ran, subtle at first, then tighter with each step. Not for speed, for support. Behind them, one of the lighter-built species had already dropped from a run to a fast walk, her movements precise but slower now, conserving what she could. No one stopped. Not yet. They couldn't. The instructor hadn't said to. The second rotation exposed the difference. Muscle fatigue set in. Not dramatic. Not immediate. But cumulative. The kind that builds quietly until it changes how your body moves without asking permission. Stride shortened. Foot placement became heavier. Breathing grew louder, not uncontrolled, but no longer silent. The human's pace remained the same. Not identical. Nothing stays identical under load, but consistent in a way that didn't draw attention at first. Until it did. A recruit running just ahead of him glanced back once. A quick look. Then another. Because the human was still there. Same distance. Same rhythm. Not gaining. Not losing. Just there. The third rotation began. This was where decisions started to show. Not conscious ones. Physical ones. Bodies choosing what they could maintain and what they couldn't. One of the front runners slowed for the first time, his earlier push costing him now as his stride lost its sharpness. Another behind him began drifting outward on the curve, his balance slightly off under the compounded load. A heavier recruit near the middle dropped to a walk. Deliberate. Controlled. But a clear change. The human ran past him. Not fast. Not aggressively. Just at the same steady pace he had held since the beginning. No glance. No acknowledgement. Just forward. By the final stretch, the formation had broken completely. There was no group anymore. Only individuals. Each moving at the edge of what they could sustain. The human crossed the finish line in the middle of the remaining runners. Not first. Not last. He slowed to a stop. Turned. And waited. That was the part that drew attention. Not the run. Not the pace. The waiting. Most recruits, when they finished, moved aside. Hands on knees. Adjusting gear. Catching breath. Recovering. The human stood upright. Breathing steady. Not untouched by the effort, but not taken by it either. Present. Available. As if the run had been something to complete. Not something to survive. The rest of the unit finished in fragments. One by one. Some still running. Some walking. One arriving with a visible stagger in his final steps before forcing himself upright the moment he crossed the line. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The difference was beginning to form. Not loud. Not obvious. But there. The instructor stood at the edge of the track, watching the final arrivals. His posture hadn't changed. His expression hadn't shifted. But his attention had. When the last recruit crossed the line, he waited 3 seconds. Then, again, he said. No explanation. No adjustment. Just the word. A few heads lifted. Not in protest. In recognition. This was where the real test began. The human stepped back onto the track. Same position. Same pace. And started running. She noticed him during the second run. Not at the beginning. Not when the units first moved. But somewhere in the middle of the second rotation, when patterns started to break, and the differences between effort and endurance became harder to hide. Her name was Lyra. She had been tracking the others since the moment they entered the intake chamber. Not out of suspicion. Out of habit. Her species relied on it. Observation, comparison, small details gathered over time and assembled into something useful. Where others measured strength directly, she measured change. And change was everywhere. The tall recruit who had led the first rotation was already degrading, his stride losing precision, his breathing louder now, his shoulders rising higher with each inhale. Another, heavier built, had begun compensating unevenly, favoring one side just enough to create imbalance on the turns. Small things, but clear, predictable, expected. The human did not fit the pattern. At first, she thought he was just conserving energy, holding back. It would have made sense, Pace yourself early, survive longer, outperform later. But that theory didn't hold. Because he wasn't improving. He wasn't accelerating. He wasn't changing at all. He was simply continuing.
Same stride.
Same rhythm. Same distance from the runners ahead and behind him. As if the environment wasn't something to fight, just something to move through. Lyra adjusted her own pace slightly, drifting closer without making it obvious. Her 4 eyes tracked independently, 2 forward, 2 angled, collecting overlapping fields of motion. She watched his feet. Clean placement. No wasted motion. She watched his shoulders.
Low. Stable.
Not rising with strain the way others were. She watched his breathing. That was where it became clear. It wasn't shallow. It wasn't forced. It was controlled in a way that suggested familiarity, not with this exact environment, but with effort itself. Not reacting. Managing. She felt the gravity increase again as they crossed another calibrated section of the track. It pressed harder this time, just enough to shift her balance forward for half a step before she corrected. Her limbs adjusted. Her pace faltered. Just briefly. The human shortened his stride. That was it. No break. No visible recovery phase. Just a minor correction, and then the same steady motion resumed. Lyra held her position for another 20 meters. 30. Watching. Confirming. This wasn't conservation. This wasn't strategy. This was baseline. The realization settled slowly. Not dramatic, but precise. She pulled ahead slightly on the next curve, letting the distance open again. Not because she was done observing. Because she had seen enough for now. At the edge of the track, the instructor was watching. He had not moved since the run began, for arms resting at his sides. Still, but not idle. His gaze moved across the runners with deliberate attention, tracking degradation, imbalance, hesitation, cataloging. When his eyes passed over the human, they slowed. Just slightly. The kind of pause that only someone trained to notice pauses would see. Lyra saw it. That was the second confirmation. She crossed the finish line of the second rotation with a controlled exhale, her limbs heavier now, her muscles beginning to register the cumulative load. She didn't stop immediately, didn't break form. She walked forward a few steps, then turned. The human was behind her. Same distance as before. Same pace. Unchanged. He crossed the line and stopped. And waited. Again. Lyra watched him from across the track. Not openly. Not in a way that would draw attention. But carefully. There were no signs of strain that matched the environment. No tightness in the jaw. No shifting posture to relieve pressure. No visible effort beyond what movement required. He was working. That much was clear. But the work was contained. Controlled. As if he had already decided how much it would cost and refused to let it take more. Around them, the others were recovering. Some bent forward, hands on knees. Some adjusting gear, rolling shoulders, shaking out limbs to push back against the growing fatigue. One recruit sat down briefly, only for a second, before forcing himself back up the moment he realized the instructor was still watching. No one wanted to be the first to fail. The human didn't look at any of them. He stood where he was, breathing, waiting. Lyra stepped closer this time, not directly in front of him, just near enough that speaking wouldn't carry far. "You're not adjusting," she said. Her voice was calm, measured, not accusatory, observational. The human glanced at her, not surprised, just acknowledging. "I am," he said. His voice matched his movement, even, unhurried. "It doesn't look like it," she replied. A brief pause. He considered that. Then, "It feels normal," he said. Lyra held his gaze for a moment longer, searching for something, strain, arrogance, deception. She found none, just a simple answer, given without weight. The instructor's voice cut across the track. Positions. No discussion. No follow-up. The third run was about to begin. Lyra stepped back into place. But this time, her attention didn't spread across the group. It stayed fixed on one variable that didn't behave like the others. At the edge of the track, the instructor shifted his stance. Just slightly. A small movement, but intentional. His arms did not fold this time. They remained at his sides, open, watching. The signal came. The unit moved. And now, two people were observing the same thing, one trying to understand it, the other trying to measure how far it went. The third run did not begin differently. That was the point. No new instruction. No visible change in the track. No announcement from the instructor. Just the same signal. The same movement. The same expectation. And then, the gravity shifted. Not all at once. Not enough to trigger immediate reaction. It crept upward. Smooth. Controlled. The kind of increase designed to be felt but not identified. At first, it passed unnoticed. The runners were already under strain. Muscles were warm, fatigue already present, breathing already elevated. A small increase blended into that. Until it didn't. The first sign came from the front. One of the lead runners, strong, efficient, consistent through the first two rotations, lost his rhythm. Not completely. Just a fraction. His foot struck the track heavier than intended. His next step came half a beat late. Then, he corrected. Forced it back. But the damage was done. His body had noticed. Behind him, another recruit adjusted her posture sharply, spreading her weight lower than before. Her movements became more deliberate, less fluid. She felt it too. The environment had changed. But no one had said anything. No one confirmed it. Which meant one thing. It was intentional. The track curved. The resistance underfoot seemed stronger now, not because it had changed, but because everything else had. Every step cost more. Every push forward required deeper engagement. Breathing patterns shifted again. What had been controlled became effort. What had been effort became strain. Lyra felt it clearly on the next incline. Her limbs responded slower than before, not weak, not failing, but delayed. The feedback loop between intent and motion stretched just enough to be noticeable. She adjusted. Lower stance. Shorter stride. More control. She glanced sideways. The human had shortened his stride again. Slightly more than before. His center of gravity lowered. His arms moved closer to his body. Efficient. Automatic. No break in rhythm. No sign of surprise. As if the change had been expected. Or simply irrelevant. Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly. This was no longer subtle. The gap between reaction and adaptation was becoming visible. The group stretched further along the track. Those who had pushed hardest early were paying for it now. The front thinned. The middle fractured. The back began to fall away. One recruit slowed to a walk. Then another. Not quitting. Not stopping. But no longer able to maintain pace. The instructor watched it all. From the same position. Unmoving. His eyes tracked the fractures in the group. The moments where bodies chose preservation over output. Where instinct overrode instruction. And then, his gaze returned to the human. Still running. Still steady. Still within the same narrow band of pace he had held since the beginning. The gravity increased again. This time, it crossed a threshold. The kind that couldn't be mistaken. The kind that forced acknowledgement. A collective shift rippled through the runners. Subtle sounds, breath pulled sharper, footfalls heavier, one short, strained exhale that wasn't meant to be heard but was. Lyra's movement dipped. Just for a step. Her balance shifted forward, forcing her to catch herself with a deeper plant of her lead limb. She recovered. But slower this time. More cost. She looked again. The human shoulders had lowered further. His stride was now compact, efficient, built for endurance rather than speed. But it held. Unbroken. He passed one of the front runners. Not aggressively. Not intentionally. Just because the other had slowed and he had not. No glance. No reaction. Forward. Another recruit near the outer curve misstepped completely. His foot caught the textured surface at the wrong angle, and his balance collapsed inward. He didn't fall, but he had to stop running to recover. That was enough. Once you stopped, restarting costs more. Sometimes too much. He shifted to a walk. Head down. Continuing, but out of contention. The track was no longer a test of performance. It was a filter. And the filter was tightening. The human reached the final stretch. His breathing was deeper now, not unchanged, not effortless, but controlled, measured, contained within a boundary he did not let it cross. He finished the rotation, stepped off the track, and turned. Again, waiting. Lyra crossed seconds later. This time, she didn't try to hide the effort. Her posture lowered. Her limbs carried visible weight. Her breathing came harder. She stepped beside him, closer than before. "This isn't baseline," she said quietly. Not a question. A conclusion. The human looked at the track, at the runners still moving, at the ones who had slowed, then back at her. "Feels heavier," he said. The same tone, the same calm. No emphasis, no concern. Lyra studied him for a moment. Then, "You're not surprised," she said. A pause. He considered that, then gave a small, almost unnoticeable shrug. "They said it would change," he replied. Simple. Literal. Accepted. Before Lyra could respond, the instructor's voice cut through the air again. "Continue." No rest period. No adjustment. Just escalation. Several recruits hesitated. Not long. Not enough to disobey, but enough to show. This was no longer expected. The human stepped forward, back onto the track. Same position. Same readiness. And began running again. Behind him, Lyra followed. But now, the question wasn't just how strong he was. It was how far this could go. At the edge of the track, the instructor finally moved. One step, closer to the control panel embedded in the wall. His hand hovered above it, not pressing, not yet. Watching the runners. Watching one in particular. Measuring, not their limits, but the absence of one. And deciding how much further to push. The data file wasn't supposed to be long. That was Breath's first assumption. When he accessed the system archive, he expected a standard entry, basic physiology, environmental origin, maybe a short behavioral summary. Enough to understand baseline capabilities. Enough to place the species within known limits. That was how it worked. Every species had limits.
Documented.
Measured. Predictable. He initiated the search anyway. Human biology. The file loaded. And kept loading. Breath stood still as the interface expanded, page after page compiling into a structured report that far exceeded the length of any standard entry he had reviewed in the past decade. That alone was unusual. He began reading. Methodically. The way he approached everything. No skipping. No assumptions. Classification. Carbon-based bipedal organism. Homeworld. Earth. Gravity. 1.0 standard. Normal. At least on the surface. But the deeper entries told a different story. Environmental conditions. Variable. Unstable. Extremes across multiple axes. Temperature, terrain, atmospheric composition. Regions of intense cold. Regions of extreme heat. Areas where survival required constant adaptation rather than specialization. Breath slowed slightly. Most advanced species evolved in stable environments. Predictable systems. That was how efficiency developed. Humans had not. They had evolved in fluctuation, which meant they were not optimized for one condition. They were adaptable to many. He continued. Musculoskeletal structure. Dense bone composition. Non-hollow. Reinforced for impact absorption. Microflex tolerance under stress before structural failure. Breath paused. Flex before break. That was inefficient for speed, but efficient for survival under repeated load. He thought briefly of the training floor, of weight carried beyond instruction, of movement sustained under increasing pressure. Then he moved on. Muscular system. Layered distribution. Primary movement muscles supported by deep stabilizer groups. Continuous low-level engagement even at rest. Postural integrity maintained without conscious effort. Breath's eyes narrowed slightly. That explained the stillness. The way the human stood, without visible strain. The load wasn't being carried by a single system. It was distributed. Always active. Always engaged. He scrolled further. Respiratory and cardiovascular adaptation. High oxygen processing variability. Efficient energy conversion across extended durations. Endurance prioritization over peak output. Recovery cycles shorter than galactic average. Breath exhaled slowly. Endurance. Not strength. Not speed. Sustainability. He shifted his attention back to the training floor in his mind. Not the fastest. Not the strongest. But the one who did not degrade. Then he reached the section that stopped him. Behavioral pattern. Persistence hunting. Breath read the title twice. Then continued. Humans did not rely on overwhelming force to secure prey. They did not require superior size. They did not depend on speed bursts alone. Instead, they selected a target and followed it continuously. The prey would run, gain distance, escape temporarily, then stop to recover. The human would arrive, still moving. The cycle would repeat again and again until the prey could no longer stand, not because it was weaker, but because it could not sustain. Breath remained still for several seconds. The concept was inefficient, time-consuming, resource-heavy, but effective, relentlessly effective. He thought of the track, of repeated rotations, of increasing gravity, of a human who did not accelerate, but did not stop. He continued reading. Pain response and neurological processing. Delayed signal integration compared to galactic baseline. Chemical modulation under stress conditions. Increased tolerance during prolonged exertion. Functional capacity maintained despite escalating discomfort. Breath read that section twice. Not because he didn't understand it,
but because he did. Too well.
Pain in most species was a limiter, a signal that forced withdrawal. Preserved function by preventing overuse. Humans reduced the signal. Not entirely, but enough. Enough to continue when others would stop. The final section loaded. Behavioral response to physical limits. Most species exhibit a hard threshold response, a point at which the body enforces cessation of activity. Humans possess this threshold, but are capable of overriding it. Consciously, repeatedly, documented across multiple fields: combat, athletics, survival. Conclusion: human physical limits are not fixed barriers. They are variable, often exceeded under sufficient motivation. Breath closed the file, then opened it again. Scrolled back. Read the last line once more. Not fixed barriers. Variable. He stood in the command room, silent. The low hum of the station systems filled the space around him, steady and constant. He thought about the weight rack, about a recruit completing additional sets, not to impress, not to compete, but because no one had told him to stop. He thought about the track,
about a pace that did not break.
He thought about the chamber he hadn't used yet, the one deeper in the station, designed for controlled stress testing, higher ranges, unforgiving calibration. He had used it before,
rarely, carefully,
because every species had a ceiling, and that room found it, always. Breath looked at the file one last time, at the line that refused to settle into his understanding. Limits not fixed. He closed the interface,
turned,
and walked toward the control panel. Not the one for the training floor, the one for something else. Something more precise. Behind him, the system lights dimmed slightly as the station cycled into its next operational phase. Below, on the training track, the runs continued. Recruits pushing, struggling, adapting, and one
continuing,
unchanged in the way that mattered. Breath placed his hand on the secondary console.
Paused.
Not out of hesitation. Out of calculation. He had spent decades identifying limits, measuring them, building training around them. It was how the system worked. It was how soldiers were made. But this did not fit the system, which meant one of two things. Either the system was incomplete, or this recruit was. Breath activated the console. A new interface opened. Minimal, controlled, one line input, one scheduled function. He entered a command. Private assessment. No unit, no audience, just one subject, and a room designed to answer a single question. He confirmed the request. The system accepted it without delay. Scheduled. Pending. Breath removed his hand from the panel, and for the first time in longer than he could remember,
He was not certain what the result would be.
The message appeared before the next cycle began. No announcement. No explanation. Just a single line on the assignment board. Report to Sector C, 17. 0600. Individual assessment. Marcus read it once. Then stepped away. No questions. No hesitation. Around him, the rest of the unit prepared for standard drills, gear checks, quiet movement, low conversation carried in short, controlled exchanges. No one else had received a message. That was clear. Lyra noticed.
Of course she did.
Her eyes tracked the board, then Marcus, then back again. A pattern deviation. She stepped closer. That's not a unit assignment, she said. Marcus nodded once. Looks like it. You know what it is? No. A pause. You're still going? She asked. Marcus glanced toward the corridor leading out of the chamber. Then back at her. They asked, he said. Simple. Final. He left before she could respond. Sector C, 17 was deeper than the training floors. The corridors narrowed. The lighting dimmed. The hum of the station changed pitch, lower, heavier, as if the systems here operated under greater load. Marcus walked alone. Each step carried slightly more weight than the last. Not dramatically, just enough to be noticeable. The gravity here was already higher, controlled, intentional. He passed 2 readout panels along the wall. The numbers were elevated, above training baseline.
He didn't stop to calculate them.
He didn't need to. He kept walking. The chamber door was waiting at the end of the corridor. Reinforced.
Sealed.
Built for containment. A wide observation window sat to the right, its surface thick and darkened just enough to obscure detail from the outside. Movement behind it. Multiple figures. Watching. The door opened. Breth stood on the other side. You came, he said. Marcus stepped forward. You ask. Breth studied him for a moment. Not long. Just enough. This assessment is voluntary, Breth said. You can stop at any time. Marcus nodded. What do you need me to do? He asked. Breth stepped aside. Stand in the center. The chamber was empty. No equipment. No obstacles. No distractions. Just a smooth floor with a single marked circle. Marcus walked to it.
Stopped.
The door sealed behind him with a low, final sound. He looked once toward the observation window. Shapes behind it.
Still.
Then forward again. Waiting. The gravity increased. Not gradually. Not hidden. A clean, immediate jump. 3.0 standard. It hit like weight with intent. Marcus felt it instantly. His knees bent. Not by choice. By physics. His spine compressed slightly. His lungs adjusted. Air felt heavier. Denser. His body reacted in sequence. Feet widening, center lowering. Muscles engaging deeper than before. 2 seconds. That was all it took. Then, he held.
Standing.
Breathing.
Still.
Behind the glass, the observation room was silent. More than breath now. Officers. Command level. Watching. No one spoke. Not yet. Breth's voice came through the chamber. How do you feel? Marcus considered it. Heavy, he said. No dramatics. No exaggeration. Just accurate. Breth watched him. Then, we're increasing. The gravity rose again. 3.5 standard. This time, it wasn't something the body could absorb quietly. It pressed down hard. Relentless. Marcus dropped to one knee. The impact of it forced. Not chosen. His hands moved slightly outward, catching balance against the load. His head lowered. Breath pulled deeper. Harder. For 3 seconds. He stayed there.
Still.
Then, he planted his foot.
Pressed.
Every muscle in his legs engaged at once. Not smoothly. Not easily. But completely. He stood.
Slow.
Controlled. Shaking not wildly, not out of control, but visibly. Effort.
Real.
Undeniable. And then, he held again. Behind the glass, movement. One officer leaned forward. Another spoke quietly to the one beside him. Breth did not move. His eyes stayed fixed. Time passed. Not quickly. Not slowly. Just steadily. Marcus stood at 3.5. His breathing was no longer even. It was controlled but deep. Each inhale measured, each exhale deliberate. His hands had tightened into loose fists, not clenched, not rigid, but no longer relaxed. His legs trembled. Small movements. Constant. Muscle fibers working beyond comfort. Beyond normal sustained load. 10 minutes. 15.
20.
The body sent signals. Stop. Enough. Limit reached. Marcus felt them. Of course he did. He didn't ignore them. He heard them.
And did not follow.
Breath pressed the intercom again. Marcus. A pause. I'm here, Marcus answered. Voice tighter now, but steady. How do you feel? Marcus took a breath. My legs are burning, he said. Another breath. My back is tight. A small pause. Then, but I'm not done. Silence filled the observation room. No one moved. No one interrupted. Breath looked at the control panel. Then back at Marcus.
Standing. Shaking.
Holding. At a level most species would not survive for long. And something shifted. Not in the data. Not in the measurement. In him. He cut the gravity. Instantly. Back to standard. The release hit Marcus like air returning after pressure. His body responded immediately. He exhaled hard. Dropped, not collapsed, but chose to sit. Forearms resting on his knees. Head lowered for a moment. Catching breath. Recovering. Then, he looked up.
Toward the glass.
Did I pass? He asked. No one answered right away. Because the question didn't fit. This wasn't a pass or fail. This was something else. Something the system didn't have a category for. The chamber door opened. Marcus stood. Walked out. Sat on the bench, just outside. Not dramatic. Not slow. Just tired.
Honest.
Breath stepped forward. Behind him, the observation door opened. And the officers entered. One by one. All of them looking at the same thing. Not the chamber. Not the data. The human. And for the first time, the question was no longer, where is his limit? It was, does one exist? The corridor felt different now. Not physically. Not in gravity or temperature. But in attention. Marcus sat on the bench outside the chamber, forearms resting on his knees, breathing slower now, returning to baseline one measured inhale at a time. The fatigue was still there.
Deep. Honest.
Earned. But controlled. Always controlled. The door behind him remained open. And through it, they came. One by one. Not recruits. Not instructors. Command. Their presence didn't need introduction. It carried rank and posture alone. They stepped into the corridor without sound, forming a loose line. Not rigid, not ceremonial, but deliberate. Every one of them looking at Marcus. Not aggressively. Not with challenge. With evaluation. The kind reserved for something that didn't fit expectation. Marcus noticed. Of course he did. He lifted his head slightly, met their gaze for a moment, then looked to Breath. Waiting. Not standing. Not performing. Just present. That alone shifted something in the room. Most recruits would have stood. Out of instinct. Out of protocol. Marcus didn't. Not out of disrespect. Out of simplicity. He was tired. And he wasn't pretending otherwise. No one corrected him. A figure stepped forward from the line. Senior. Clear in bearing. Her presence was not loud, but it carried weight in a different way than Breath's. Less pressure. More certainty. You are Marcus, she said. Not a question. Yes, he replied. You were informed this assessment was voluntary. Yes. A slight pause. You were not informed of the gravity levels. Marcus glanced briefly toward Breath, then back.
No.
Another pause. Measured. You maintained 3.5 standard gravity for 31 minutes, she said. Her tone did not change, but the words carried impact. That level exceeds operational thresholds for multiple advanced species. Marcus considered that, then nodded once. I didn't know the number, he said. Honest. Simple. The officer studied him for a moment longer. Then, we did. She turned slightly, not away from him, toward Breath. A look passed between them. Not long, but understood. Then she faced Marcus again. There is an opening in Apex Unit, she said. No build-up. No ceremony. Just the statement. Highest tier combat designation within this station. The corridor remained silent. Even the ambient hum seemed lower. Marcus blinked once. Not in surprise.
Processing.
When would I transfer? He asked.
Direct.
Practical. No excitement. No hesitation. Just the next step. Breath spoke. You wouldn't. Marcus looked at him. A small shift. Why? He asked. Breath didn't answer immediately. For the first time since the chamber. He took a moment. Long enough to matter. I told Command you're not ready, he said. The words landed heavier than the gravity had. Not loud, but absolute. Marcus held his gaze. Is that true? He asked. No challenge. Just clarification. Breath exhaled once.
Slow.
Controlled.
No, he said.
Honest. And then, I'm not finished with you. The officer's eyes moved between them, not interrupting, observing. Breath continued. I've trained soldiers for 30 years, he said.
His voice was different now.
Less command. More reflection. I've always looked for the same thing. A pause. The ceiling. He gestured slightly toward the chamber behind them. I apply pressure. Increase load. Remove variables. And eventually, every recruit reaches it. He looked at Marcus. I mark that point. Another pause. And build from there. Silence settled again. Then, I haven't found yours. The words were quiet, but they changed the air. Not dramatic. Not exaggerated. Just true. Marcus looked down briefly, thinking, then back up. I was close, he said. Breath shook his head once. No, he replied. You were working. A small shift in tone. Subtle. But you weren't done. The officer stepped forward again. You understand what he's saying, she said. Marcus nodded. I think so. She studied him, then asked, why didn't you stop? That was the real question. Not the time. Not the gravity.
That.
Marcus didn't answer immediately. He looked at the floor for a second, then at Breath, then back at her. You said I could, he replied. A pause. But no one told me I should. Silence.
Deep.
Complete. Because the answer wasn't impressive. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't designed to be remembered. It was simple. And that made it something else entirely. The officer nodded once, then turned. Recommendation stands, she said.
To Breath.
Not a command. Not quite. But close. Breath inclined his head slightly.
Acknowledging.
Not agreeing.
Not yet.
The officers began to leave. One by one. No further words. No ceremony. They had seen what they came to see. The corridor emptied. Until only two remained. Breath and Marcus. The hum of the station returned to its normal level. Steady. Unchanging. Marcus leaned back slightly on the bench, rolling his shoulders once, loosening tension. Breath sat beside him. Not as instructor. Not fully.
Just there.
They'll push for transfer, Breath said. Marcus nodded. Okay. Another pause. You don't seem concerned, Breath added. Marcus shrugged slightly. I'll go where I'm told. Then, a small shift. But I'd like to finish here. Breath looked at him.
Really looked this time.
Not measuring. Not testing. Understanding. That's the plan, he said. Somewhere above them, the station systems adjusted. New parameters. New baselines. Not written yet, but forming. Because something had changed, not just in a recruit, in the system itself. And both of them knew it, even if neither said it out loud. The next cycle began the same way all cycles did. Lights shifting from low to full. The tone signaling start of session. The quiet movement of recruits stepping onto the training floor. Routine. Structured. Predictable. But something had changed. Not in the system. In the way it was understood. Iron Unit 7 assembled in formation. 12 recruits. Same positions. Same spacing. But the silence between them felt different now. Not uncertainty. Not tension. Something else. Awareness. Breath stepped forward. No platform this time. No distance. He stood among them. at their level, for arms at his sides. Uncrossed. New baseline, he said. His voice carried across the floor, calm, even, absolute. 2.0 standard. The words settled.
And stayed.
Several recruits reacted. Not visibly, not openly, but internally, because they knew what that meant. They had felt it. On the track. On the edge of failure. 2.0 was not training weight. It was pressure. Sustained. Demanding. Breath let the silence sit for exactly 3 seconds. Then, you will adapt. Not encouragement. Not motivation. Expectation. His gaze moved across the unit. Stopped. On Marcus. Just for a moment. Then continued. The recruit beside you, Breath said, stood at 3.5 standard yesterday. A shift moved through the formation.
Small.
But real. Eyes didn't turn. They didn't need to. They already knew. You will train at 2, Breath continued. And you will adjust. No alternatives given. No conditions. Just the path forward. The drills began. And the difference showed immediately. Every movement cost more. Every step required decision. Breathing became part of the work, not something that supported it. Gorik, the largest in the unit, set his stance wider than before, lowering his center of gravity to manage the load. His movements were slower now, but deliberate. Lyra adjusted her rhythm. Shorter strides. More control. Less waste. Her 4 eyes tracked balance constantly, recalibrating with each shift in pressure. Others followed their own methods. Some struggled. Some adapted faster. But none stopped. Not today.
Marcus trained with them.
Same gravity. Same conditions. No advantage. And this time, the difference wasn't that he looked unaffected.
He didn't.
He was working. Sweat visible. Breathing deeper. Muscles engaged.
Just like the rest.
But he did not stop. Not between sets. Not when the weight pressed harder. Not when fatigue began to build.
He moved.
Paused only when required. Then moved again. Steady. Consistent. Reliable. Not above the system. Within it. But unchanged by it. At the edge of the floor, Breath watched. Arms still at his sides. Eyes moving across the unit. Not searching for weakness anymore. That wasn't the focus. He was watching something else. Adaptation. Not just physical. Mental. Where others hesitated, they corrected. Where they struggled, they continued. Because now, they had seen something. Not perfection. Not invincibility. But possibility. The session ended without announcement. As it always did. Recruits slowed.
Stopped.
Recovered. Some stayed where they were. Others moved toward the rest area. No one collapsed. No one quit. That was new. Breath turned away from the floor. Walked back to his command room. Saturday. Opened the report interface. This time. Official. Not notes. Not observation. Record. He began writing. Subject. Human recruit. Marcus assessment status. Ongoing. Performance exceeded all standard metrics under variable gravity conditions. Observed behavior indicates sustained function beyond expected physiological thresholds. No fixed limit identified. He paused. Looked at the line. Then continued. Recommendation. Do not construct future training protocols based on assumed human limitations. Current data suggests such limitations are not reliably measurable within existing parameters. Each subject must be evaluated independently. Without assumption. He stopped writing. Read it once. Then,
send it.
No edits. No hesitation. Breath stood. Moved to the observation window. Below, the training floor sat quiet. Lights dimmed. Equipment reset. Empty. Except for one figure. Marcus. At the center of the floor. No instruction. No audience. Just movement. Push-ups.
Slow.
Controlled. Each repetition clean.
Consistent.
Not rushed.
Not forced.
Just continued. Breath watched. For a long time. Long enough that the repetition lost count. Long enough that the motion became something else. Not exercise. Not training. Habit. Nature. Below, Marcus finished a set.
Paused.
Not collapsing. Not exhausted. Just thinking. Then, started again. Breath exhaled slowly. Turned off the command panel. The room dimmed. Quiet.
Still.
For 30 years, he had trained soldiers the same way. Find the limit. Mark it. Build around it. It was efficient. Reliable. Proven.
But now, that model had changed.
Not broken. Not replaced. Expanded. Because of one variable. A human who did not treat limits as walls, but as suggestions. Breath left the room. The station moved through its cycle. Unchanged. On the surface. But somewhere in its systems, in its protocols, in its expectations, a new parameter had been introduced. Unwritten. Unmeasured. But present. And on the training floor, under the quiet weight of a heavy world, one recruit kept moving.
Not because he was told to.
Not because he had to, but because he could.